Hello, everyone, and welcome to United Way. Live United. I'm Terry Westerfield, and joining me today, I am very proud to have a colleague of mine and a friend who is going to talk about some of the most important data you're going to hear in a long time. And I'm talking about Dr. Allison Plyer, who is the Executive Director and Chief Demographer for the Greater New Orleans Community Data Center. And we're here to talk about the Index at 8. And joining her today also, Mary Ambrose, who is the Senior Executive Vice President of Community Impact for United Way of Southeast Louisiana. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Terry.
Well, for those of you who are joining us, the Greater New Orleans Community Data Center plays a key role in our progress as a region. Now, the research provided is invaluable, and not just for New Orleans nonprofits, but for the entire city and the business community. And at this point, I want to talk a little bit about, because we hear of the GNO CDC, we see Allison's good work all the time, but there's kind of a special partnership between the data center and United Way of Southeast Louisiana. And Mary, I think you were kind of in on it from the start.
I was really, blessed to be there at the beginning, the very beginning of the data center and watched it come in. They started in 1997, so 15 years ago, and they're celebrating their anniversary this year, 15 years in the business. But they grew out of United Way. They started at Tulane. We incubated at United Way, and so they grew, and I saw the growing pains and everything. What are we going to be to this community? And what came out of it was this beautiful, beautiful baby that is such a valuable baby to this community.
And now a teenager.
It's a teenager. It's 15.
I wonder what we'll do as adults.
I know. God, if you do, Index at 8 and all the reports that have come out about data in the 15 years, I don't see how this city could grow without the data that's coming from the data center.
And I think that's a good jumping off point for just a moment, because there are those who will say, data, you can use it to prove anything you want. Maybe, but what the Community Data Center has been putting out and what you, Allison, have been researching for all this time, it's amazing stuff, because a lot of what we are going to do for the future and we learn from the past is based on your research and that data that gives us this foundation to build upon.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. I want to start by saying that really the partnership with United Way has been critical ever since our inception, and that they've been, a solid partner with us, throughout the entire 15 years. Lots of other funders, we have to, go back every once in a while and ask for more funding, and the United Way is just a consistent partner throughout, right? And that provides a foundation from which we can really operate and know that we can be solvent and productive in the community. I think it is interesting, the question of data can be skewed to prove anything, and there's no doubt that that's true. But what we really do at the data center is look at the most rigorous literature to really point out, okay, what does this indicator tell us? What do the experts say about what this indicator means? And then we vet it with lots of community experts. So we show the data to people from a broad range of perspectives, people who work in the nonprofit sector, people who work in the government sector, people who work in the business sector. So, if they say, well, this data is this way because, the cost that, for example, the landlords are facing now with increased insurance is not just that the landlords want to charge more rent, it's that they have to. Then we put that in there, but then at the same time we talk about, but from the perspective of the community, paying these higher rents is really hard because the jobs haven't increased their wages, right? And so we try to really provide all of the perspectives on every single data point that we present, and not just use it from one perspective or another, and in that way be neutral.
I would say, and that's really important, because too often sometimes it seems like the nonprofits are over here, business was over here, and this is an inclusive partnership. We should all be working together for the betterment, and I think we've especially seen that because not only are you celebrating the anniversary, the 15th of the Community Data Center, but there's another anniversary we would really rather not celebrate, but it has been 8 years now since Katrina, and then just shortly thereafter Hurricane Rita struck as well.
That's right.
But a lot we have learned. It's caused us to stop, to think about how we were going to rebuild, how this rebirth, this renaissance of this region was going to take place. And a lot of it came down to the good work of the research and what you were seeing, but also predicated upon nonprofits like United Way and the Community Impact Mary and her team were putting together, and others, again, working in this broad coalition.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Katrina really caused a break in the status quo, right? So for the first time, people saw the possibility of taking on major reforms that were really critical for our region. Everything from, K through 12 to criminal justice to, developing affordable housing at a larger scale, citizen engagement, right? Land use planning has been reformed. Obviously, just more reforms really than almost any other city has taken on simultaneously in modern history. And that has been critical to really advancing our progress. And so those reforms are continuing, as we see still in the arenas such as obviously K through 12, but also criminal justice, healthcare, et cetera. And those are all continuing to be really important. And what, in addition, we have done is we've developed now a robust economic development sector, which is working to take advantage of new emerging opportunities. We've always been blessed with fabulous natural assets between the river and the oil and gas. We have the ability to have some level of job production here because of those assets. But we haven't always moved our economy into the next century, right? Thinking about creative digital, which we are now, thinking about, bioinnovation, which we are now, thinking about, the latest in advanced manufacturing, which we are now. And so we're finally in sustainable industries, including wetland restoration. So we're finally starting to really look at how do we become an economy of, the future, right? And not just living off of our good assets. And so through that, we've actually produced an economy now, according to the data, that is producing jobs at a level that's similar to, southern metros that have done really well, like, Austin, Houston, Raleigh, Orlando, Nashville. Those are the ones we've compared the New Orleans Metro to in our New Orleans Index at 8, and entrepreneurship that is even higher than the rates that they have in those aspirational metros, which is amazing because previously we were, in a peer group of post-industrial metros like Cleveland, right, Detroit, et cetera.
On the decline.
We
don't like to say it, but we were.
We were right. And when you have a disaster the size of Katrina, the literature shows that those declining trends can get accelerated, and that was the danger. And so, but there have been a few instances in history, and this is according, to those who have studied it, where they've changed trajectories, and it was because of taking on major reforms and taking advantage of new economic opportunities, and we're seeing some of that in these trends, these job rates that are competitive with other southern metros, these entrepreneurship rates which are 56% above the nation, 33% above the other aspirational metros. And then also we have a really diverse economy, which is something that not all of the post-industrial cities can boast. So what we also looked at in the New Orleans Index at 8 is where are we lacking?
And that's what I wanted to ask, because I do want to talk more about the positives, but also when you mention some of these other cities, when you think of them, one of the things you think about, what a great lifestyle, what a great quality of life. New Orleans used to be that city, it's a fun place to visit, but I don't want to live there. That has changed. That has moved.
Right.
And I think part of it, again, is because of this kind of hand-in-glove opportunity that as we move forward, we all collectively got together and said, no, we may have our differences, but we're going to rebuild this city. We're going to move forward. This region is going to thrive. And part of that is not only the business, but then again, the social service opportunities, the nonprofits who have stepped up.
That's right.
Oh, I agree. The nonprofits came back very strong after Katrina. Actually, I think, Allison, you may know better than me that the number of nonprofits have increased.
That's right.
Since Katrina. And so people are trying to figure it out, Terry. They're really trying to figure it out. Where can I play? What space can I play in so that we can lift this community up? And it can't be done by one agency. So it has to be the business community and the nonprofits and the civic communities, the universities, everybody working together to lift the tide and lift the boat.
So a kind of collective impact, because we can't be, as we used to teasingly say, the Department of Redundancy department. You can't have everybody doing the same thing. You need to be able to figure out where the different components are and how they fit together, kind of cogs in a wheel.
That's right.
Right. That's it exactly. And we all have to learn to play together. I think in our area, probably everywhere, there's this turfism. Everybody, this is mine and I'm going to make the impact here. But we can't do that anymore. That's going to bring us down the wrong road. We need to be able to work collectively and identify the issue and say, we're all going to take credit if that's what we're concerned about. But the real issue is, how do we lift everyone up?
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I know that we're looking at some of the big issues are going to be, and some of the things that we see that United Way is very interested in, where we are sure that we could play a big role given the feedback of the community. And you, Allison, in a sense, very real sense, have already done a lot of that, a lot of the listening, a lot of the research. And you've already targeted some areas, or the people have in your research, that we do need some improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. When we started looking at the recovery post-Katrina, and we're seeing sort of, where things were strong and where we were weak, and then looking at housing was a big issue in terms of having enough affordable housing. And we realized, gosh, now that as I mentioned earlier, these costs of insurance and other costs are just permanently going to be higher here now, because we just have more risk. And so we're going to have higher insurance costs. That's going to mean we're going to have higher housing costs. And yet we've got an economy that produces a disproportionate number of low-wage jobs. Every region, of course, has some retail jobs that don't pay high wages, right? But we have a disproportionate number. And so those are not going to be able to sustain those increased cost of living that we now are experiencing post-Katrina. And so we realize that, we're really in a place now that we have to have an economy that is more robust, right? And that does produce more jobs that pay higher wages, that people can't get by on lower wage jobs because we don't have those $300 rents anymore. And so, and then we realized, well, the next thing, that if we're going to produce jobs that pay higher wages, we have to have people with higher skills, because as we move more from, just simple manufacturing to advanced manufacturing, or from, just lower level healthcare jobs, you want to get into a higher level healthcare job, you have to build up your skills, right? And so we've done a lot more work, as I said, with the economic development agencies and helping them think about, where their focuses might be. And now there's a real emphasis too on workforce.
Well, let me interrupt right there, because in research and looking at all this, working together, do you see specific areas? I know before we mentioned, and I know this is something that's near and dear to Mary's heart, and digital and media and growth, and we talked about the entrepreneurial aspect of some of these things. But again, with this job force kind of training, is there something that you've specifically targeted, that you've seen that the community wants to move in the direction of?
Well, the great thing about our economy is that it is diverse. And so when you think about a place like Detroit, which did not have a diverse enough economy, and you see what happens when you're dependent on one industry. And so so having a diverse economy makes it hard to talk about it in a simple fashion, right? Because we have everything from tourism to higher ed, to we even have very robust insurance agencies here that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. Then there's the digital media, the movie industry. Obviously, we still do food manufacturing, is the port, of course. Exactly. So there's the shipping and logistics, shipbuilding. So really, we've got about a number of really a diverse level of industries, and they have a variety of skills that they require, which is great, because you don't, again, want just one to be dependent on one industry, or have or be like Silicon Valley, where you really just have really high technical skills and then some janitors. I mean, that's what they live with out there in Silicon Valley. We instead have a very diverse industry set. So the way you do workforce planning with that kind of diversity, which is an asset, is sector by sector. So each sector is going to have different kinds of skills that they're going to need. The digital media is going to have a different set of skills that they need and curriculums that they need in their workforce training than, say, the advanced manufacturing or the petrochemical plants that are being built, or then, port and logistics, right? And so what the New Orleans Business Alliance, which I know Mary's very familiar with, they this year also have put together their plan called Prosperity NOLA. And it really focuses on sort of 5 strategic sectors, which, and let's see if I can remember them all correctly. They are port and logistics, creative digital media, bioinnovation and healthcare, the sustainable industries, and advanced manufacturing. And they'll be working with each of them separately to engage with the community colleges, also with the institutions of higher education, also with the high schools, right? Depending on that specific industry and what's the best way to get workforce trained for that specific industry.
Now, what would be the role then of nonprofits and others to fit into that piece?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. So, because we have a really large percentage of our population that it lives in poverty, and this is, obviously every city has some portion of their population in poverty, but we really have a disproportionate share. And so we have a lot of people who, we're changing our K through 12, and that's very important, but we need to realize that we have a lot of adults who went through a K through 12 system, which was very substandard, right? And so those folks need skills. And so what happens to really help educate those adults, they need those nonprofit support services. They have to make a real dramatic change in their lifestyle, right, in order to actually take on a job, right? They may not know hardly anybody who's employed. We have very high unemployment rates, particularly in our poor neighborhoods, right? So just to know how to, get dressed, show up to job on time, have the kind of soft skills necessary, have the support necessary. If all of your friends are saying, blow that off, today's Mardi Gras, right? Then that's what you're going to want to do, right? But the nonprofits supply the really essential support services necessary for people to make the transition, adults, to make the transition from chronic unemployment to employment.
It's I don't know, dare I say, cultural or societal shift to that extent. But again, the support services Mary and I have heard about, just that. There are jobs out there
right.
that we've heard tell about. Again, we don't want to say just the service industry, but those have been a traditional job market here, and couldn't even find people to fill all the jobs that were needed because the people, as you said, those who were responding didn't know that they needed to comb their hair and perhaps wear the appropriate dress or be able to have even the soft skills to correctly fill out forms. And these are things that are very necessary
right.
for these folks and others to move forward so that they can partake in what we hope is going to be this new, robust, and thriving economy that's already on its way. It's the future if we can maintain what we're doing now and move forward.
Right. And I think so for listeners to sort of understand how these kind of behavioral shifts can be difficult, one thing that young people of any income level have to learn when they go into a job interview is not to pick up their phone and text in the middle of an interview.
Yes, it is.
Isn't
huge.
that amazing?
But they don't think about that.
They're so used to being connected that they'll just pick up and check their Facebook in the middle of the interview, right? And so that's so cultural for them, and it doesn't matter their income level. And so young people have to be taught that. So we need to remember that whatever the norms are of the people that you hang out with, you might need to shift those norms in order to get into a workplace situation and be successful. And so the nonprofits provide a really, as you said, important role in helping people understand about, arriving on time, what they need to do maybe to, plan their child care, get the bus they need, et cetera, get dressed, whatever, all the aspects, how to respond when there's a conflict. None of us like conflict, and we all have to deal with it at work, right? And we all, as we have matured, I think, as professionals, have learned new ways to deal with conflict, right? And so if you haven't been in a situation where you've had to do that and you're coming into a work situation, well, having some skills for dealing with conflict or anger management even, and a lot of folks come into jobs who've never worked before and really don't understand that they need to resolve conflicts productively, right? And so there's a lot of things that nonprofits are going to be really critical for in helping adults in particular, not just build skills, but also build especially those soft skills and have those supports. They need new peer groups, right, who can help them think through, how they're going to deal with new issues, or just, people who can say, hey, I'm not going to go have a beer with you in the middle of the day because I've got a job too, but we'll go on Friday night, like a different peer group that enjoys a working lifestyle and then enjoys the benefits of it.
We're talking, though, about a more youthful peer group. Right now, I'm thinking about swing that pendulum a little bit. We were a, quote, gray city long before Katrina, had a large population of a certain demographic, people over the age of 50 or 55. We're still strong. And as baby boomers continue to get older, wanting to keep their job, wanting to stay viable, just as many things they need to learn to. How do they come kicking and screaming into the social media world? How do they keep
where
up
Facebook
with the technology?
is old now.
That's right.
And that's it. And
That's
all
right.
these things, because everybody, again, has a need, has a niche, has a role to play.
That's right. Yeah. And that's really true. I'm a demographer, as we mentioned earlier. And so, I'm really conscious of demographic trends. One of the things about the baby boomers is when you look at the numbers, you realize, oh, my God. I mean, it's a huge number of people that are crossing over the 65, or the 55, and then the 65. And so, and there aren't, there's not that big swell of people behind them, right? And so what that means is that we do need to consider working longer, and how are we going to do that, right? And so then similarly, getting those technical skills, right, that like maybe natural to the young people, but aren't quite so for us because we haven't been doing it that way our whole lives.
We weren't born with a chip in our head?
No, exactly, right? Even just like, I've watched some of my younger employees and how fast they type. It's incredible with a keyboard, or how they can manipulate different aspects of the computer. So I think all of us, over time have to learn new skills. And absolutely true that the aging baby boomers, we need to continue to help them to be productive workers, because there aren't enough workers coming in behind them.
Now, one of the things that you were looking at, too, was unfortunately a disproportionate population who were incarcerated.
Yeah.
And does this kind of then also go back to the age-old discussion of opportunity? If the soft skills and others perhaps were there, this could change?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we have an incarceration rate in New Orleans, which is 3 to 4 times higher than the nation, and it's there's some things that are happening already right now with the pretrial services program that City Council has put into place. That's actually making sure that people who can't afford to post bond can still get out if they're being charged with something very minor, right, and they're not a big threat of fleeing, which is a lot of folks who can't afford to post bond, right? And so this is really important because, if somebody gets arrested and they're on their way to work and they really didn't do anything, but we don't know it yet until they actually, go through the judicial process.
That job is lost.
That job is lost, right? And sometimes, people can get arrested and never actually be charged with anything at all, and you have to check off on an employment form, just that you've been arrested. So these really...
It doesn't say convicted. It just simply says
arrested.
So those create barriers to people getting employment.
Big barriers to people getting employment.
Or
exactly.
getting exactly that. Because if they did have a job and now, wow, maybe even far and fewer between, right?
That's right. That's right. And, that's another data point that we track in the New Orleans Index is our employment rates among African-American men in particular. So employment, I think it's important for people to understand that employment for men has been declining nationwide as we've, our economy has shifted away from manufacturing and construction. So we see, regardless of race, we see employment rates in men declining from, I think it was about 90% in the 1980s, and now it's down to about 75%. But that's been much harder on African-American men, who are down around 53%. So only 53% of working-age African-American men have employment. We don't realize that when we look at those unemployment rates, because those only count the people who are looking for work, right? But then there's a lot of discouraged workers who just aren't even looking. And so when we think about that 53%, and then we recognize in New Orleans, we're putting a big barrier in front of a lot of people by having these high arrest rates and high incarceration rates that we have. These pretrial services are a big and important way to make sure that people don't have that, that big black mark on their resume when they never are actually convicted of anything.
And again, when they get out or have the case dismissed, they could have the opportunity again to go back and get the training, perhaps to become, to better themselves in terms of economy, have a better job, a job they like, a job that will pay more money, make them more independent and self-sufficient, which is our mission at United Way, so they can take care of their family.
Absolutely, right. And, we know also, on that thread, when we think particularly about African-American men, that there's literature that shows that, that children who have a father who is engaged with them, even if the father doesn't live in the home, if the father and the mother live separately, but if the father is involved, the children have less likelihood of being depressed. They do better in school. They have better conflict management skills. They have more empathy, and then ultimately, of course, as they get to be teenagers, they're less likely to be involved in delinquent behaviors. So African American men are an asset, really, for addressing a lot of the challenges that we're concerned about in our community, and in terms of making sure that children, have good development opportunities and, avoid those delinquent behaviors in when they get to be youth that we're all concerned about. So African American men really, if we can boost those employment rates, then they really become an asset in many of the issues that we want to address in our community.
Well, I'll tell you what, at this point I have to give a big, applaud to Ron McLean, who is the head of Family Services, because they have a program that they've instituted called NOLA Dads because of exactly that reason. Trying to get African American men primarily, but anybody, get back involved with your children. Here's how to learn, here's how to teach, and for all the reasons you've stated.
That's right. And another thing that on that note, and I'm sure they do this great at Ron McLean's organization, social service agencies need to really embrace fathers. And oftentimes, we've shifted so much our policies and then our practices toward mothers that we forget that the fathers actually can be sort of marginalized by the services, which can be detrimental in ways we don't intend. So, having even pictures in the in the waiting room that show, the father with the children, right? Or when the father shows up at school for the parent-teacher conference, that the teacher consciously also talks to the father. These can be unconscious things, but there's many, many, many reports, and even Rod Miller was talking about this to me previously, about showing up to a parent-teacher conference and the teacher talking to the mother and just not even talking to him, as though fathers are not engaged with children.
And not part of the conversation.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of simple and more advanced ways that we can engage fathers in our social service agencies that can really be a benefit and doesn't even cost any more money.
Mary, how does this all fit in with United Way? Because I know that I have to tell everyone who's listening that I'm so proud to work with you. And you have most incredible staff there at United Way. I know it sounds a little bit like tooting our own horn, but sometimes if we don't, because I want people to know all the work that you work, again, I've used this term earlier in the conversation, but hand in glove here with Allison and others, to get that data, to get that research, to hear what the community wants to, to tell us that they think is most important, these social problems that need to be addressed, because from them spring all the other challenges that we have. So if we can sometimes get it early on, then we might get it right for the next generation or the generation thereafter.
Terry, we use this data religiously. It's so funny because every index that has come out, United Way is right there waiting for it. It's like we can't get enough of that data, and we share it with our board members and our volunteers and the other nonprofits that we're funding. But this data is so important as we look at programs, what we need to address in our communities. It drives that decision making. And so if we don't have that, then we're just kind of shooting in the wind and everything. But the issues that are raised in this index are just so profound as we think about what we still have to address. As we look at the growth in this city and in everything that's great that's happening, there's a group of people that are being left out. So Allison in her reports talks about inclusion and how we have to be able to include everyone. And so that, for us, is looking at that data and saying, what type of programs do we need to put out there into the community that would address inclusion? What are those programs out there? Rod Miller just said this morning, training. We need to have training. We need to work together to be able to provide at the lowest level to the highest level the training that's needed. Some people may need to learn a new skill, but some people may need to learn to read. So we have to be able to hit it on all fronts so that we can move people and prepare them to be ready for these jobs, because these jobs are coming in, they're going to be plentiful, but we know that they're going to require new skills, new knowledge. A lot of them are going to require degrees. But some things, Allison and I were talking earlier about plumbers and welders and those jobs that are coming on, and that they're going to be paying great money. It's a sustainable living for a family. You can raise a family on the living you're going to make as a welder. But people don't know that, and we have to educate our young people to be able to look at careers differently.
It's not that you have to go to college or be a white-collar worker.
You don't.
Blue-collar jobs are needed. They are plentiful in some of the parishes.
And they make money.
They do.
And then Allison, in her report, and Allison, you can talk more about it, talked about how, you know, we at United Way and all of our programs are really targeting kids and wanting make sure that children are ready for college, for going into careers. But Allison also talks about we have to work with the people that are out in the workforce now, because by the time those children come into the workforce, it's what?
It's going to be 50 years. Right, by the time the current 18-year-olds are 64, but those in the current K through 12 system fill up our entire workforce, it'll be 50 years.
But we have to start now, because what is the old adage about each journey begins with that first step? We have got to take that first step. And I think we've started the conversation today, and you have with your brilliant work on the Index at 8. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And that is Dr. Allison Plyer, the Executive Director and Chief Demographer with the Greater New Orleans Community Data Center Index, and Mary Ambrose, who is the Senior Executive Vice President of Community Impact, United Way of Southeast Louisiana. And for United Way, I'm Terry Westerfield. Join me next week, and join me now in Live United.
Live United.